Okay, we'll go ahead and start in with some introductory things while everyone's filtering in. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to be covering a session during this Pride Month of LGBTQ Two-Spirit support. The lovely Allison and Mark Bays have joined us again this week to share some of their knowledge and resources with us. My name is Julia Bulwitt. I am a research associate at the National American Indian Alaska Native MHTTC. So I'm here with Teresa Burrington on our K-12 initiative. So thank you all so much for joining us. If you're an educator on your summer break, we're so grateful you were here. So just a couple things to get us started. We are a national office, so we work with people in all different time zones, as you might have seen on your invitation. But we are located in Iowa City, Iowa. So that's where a lot of our staff will be joining you from. This is just a disclaimer that none of the content here is the opinions expressed by SAMHSA. It's the creations of the presenters, kind of our disclaimer as an organization funded by grant services from SAMHSA. We'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land as we are all virtual right now. This is a national land acknowledgement, so we would like to take this time to acknowledge the land and pay respect to the Indigenous nations whose homelands were forcibly taken over and inhabited. Past and present, we want to honor the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. This calls us to commit to forever learn how to be better stewards of the lands through action, advocacy, support, and education. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced occupation of Native American territories, and we respect the many diverse Indigenous people connected to this land on which we gather from time immemorial. While injustices are being committed against Indigenous people on Turtle Island, today we say thank you to those that stand with Indigenous peoples and acknowledge that land reparations must be made to allow healing for our Indigenous peoples and to Mother Earth herself. And this was created by Ella and Keely Driscoll, who are two sisters that work. Ella is with us today. They work here at the Native Center, and then Sean Bear as well. So just a couple of notes before we get started. In a moment, I'll ask if anyone would like to share a prayer or a song, maybe a photo of loved ones, something for a blessing for the session. But other housekeeping notes, the session's being recorded, so it will be uploaded on our YouTube. As well as the chat will be saved. So just be mindful of things you're saying or things that you're putting in the chat box. They will be kept for our records and then put on YouTube so other people can access it if they have something else going on at this time. Or if you would like to reflect yourself on anything said in the session or anything presented from Allison and Mark Bays today, you are more than welcome to head over to our YouTube channel. It's all recorded there. Just a couple updates from our center. We have online TA requests now. So these are some of the links that will be provided later to you. And then we also have kind of an overview of some of the programs that we offer at the center. So those are just two new tools that we've kind of added on, and those will be on the website and then provided to you in the follow-up to this session. So if anyone has anything for a blessing for this session, you can either use the raise hand, or if you'd like to just unmute and offer a song or a prayer, maybe some words of wisdom or a quote, you are more than welcome to do so at this time.
Hi, Julia. This is Dr. Bays. If there isn't anyone, we'd be more than happy to share a song and a prayer, but we would like, if anyone would be so kind to share a song and or a prayer, we'd be so open to that.
Well, Dr. Bays, if you'd like to start us out, we would love that. Thank you.
This song is a calming song, so we just think about, and I ask that when the song is being rendered, that we clear our mind and our thoughts of our busy schedule outside our office or our home room door, or even in our home area, that we focus on what we are going to be listening to today in hopes of learning what we can to share with others, especially our youth as professionals, so that they may continue to walk a healthy path. We heard
Creator, we come before you with open and humble hearts, asking for your guidance, asking for your intercession, asking for strength as we continue on our journey as Indigenous people, knowing that we have our struggles, but also recognizing that we have our triumphs. And together we come together as, today we come together as a group, focused as one mind, one spirit, listening to our stories, sharing our stories, and recognizing and honoring our community. We thank you for the words of wisdom that will be shared among us, and we thank you for this opportunity to continue on this journey together. In this we pray.
Thank you so much. If there's anyone else that wants to offer anything, either vocally or in the chat, you're more than welcome. And Dr. Allison, Dr. Mark will get started here momentarily with their presentation. You can go ahead and bring up your slides if you'd like. Okay, and with that, so Dr. Allison Bays and Dr. Standing Eagle Mark Bays, if you want to go ahead and give a brief introduction about your backgrounds, and then you can go ahead and get started.
Thank you again. Want to say hello, Sego, to everyone out there across Indian country. My name is Mark Standing Eagle Bays. I'm a psychologist. I've been working in the field of psychology and mental health as a practitioner over 15 years across Indian country, and have had beautiful opportunities in understanding from different tribes across Turtle Island, and understanding what I can do as a practitioner, as an Indigenous person, to be an instrument in each of the tribes across this beautiful land of ours. And it's something that I love what I'm doing, and I'm doing what I love. And I want to just thank you all again for the opportunity to share in a little bit of the research that we have conducted in the past and in the present.
Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Dr. Allison Bays, and I'm with the Mission Indians down here in San Antonio, Texas area, South Texas, the Tapilam Coahuitecan Nation. And we're very proud to represent our people and to share our research, to share our experience, and to share some expertise that we have in this area. It's ongoing research for us as educators and as clinicians. We find that it's very important that when we have good, rich experiences, that we are able to not just take the knowledge, but share the knowledge. It's real important to us. And so as an educator for over 25 years, I've taught on and off reservations, K through 12 settings, as well as higher ed. And we know the importance of collaborating with other people in the field. Feel very strongly that this is an important endeavor to work with the center and to keep sharing the knowledge and listening to folks and listening to people's stories and how we can learn from that and grow from that. So we thank you very much for this opportunity to come together today.
And I wanted to apologize for not sharing with you all my family and trying to jump right into what I do. And it's usually the other way around of where we come from and who our families are. I'm Pawnee Wolf Clan and Mohawk Turtle Clan and Mission Indian Waterbird Clan. I live right now in Texas with my family, off the reservation, but stay connected as much as I can, as much as we can, to continue to give back to our families and our communities. So with that, I just wanted to welcome everybody here, and we can begin.
Just something for housekeeping purposes, since we're going to focus on the slide presentation, if Julia or Ella, anybody can help us with the chat comments as they come up. But for those who are participating with us and sharing with us today, just know that we will take opportunities throughout the presentation to invite questions, comments, and to have some sharing as we're going through the topic of the Two-Spirit journey among our people. A very important topic, as Julia noted earlier, that we're in the month across this country focusing on Pride Month, and we felt it's very timely to address it from the perspective of our own people. We hear so much about it in the media and mainstream culture, and those are important ways to learn information. But we also need to turn within, to turn to our own communities, to our own tribal affiliations, and hear what our own people are saying and sharing and teaching us, more importantly, teaching us how to honor and respect our Two-Spirit among us. So that's real important to us. I'm coming from this presentation as an educator, and partnering with Mark has been really good for us because he's the clinician in the family. And so we're using this opportunity to meld the two together with our ongoing research. He started this research about 6 years ago himself as a clinician. And so we've continued to go through it and move forward through it so that we can be current with what's out there in the public and learn from our past to help make a better future for our young people.
Okay. We're going to
So our overall goal for today is to explore the LGBTQ2S personhood in relation to our Indigenous community. Moreover, we want to recognize and honor their journey. As I mentioned earlier, I'm coming from the role as an educator. And one thing that I've learned over the course of my time in working with students and their families is that you get a lot of information said to you, shared with you in the classroom setting, or sometimes out of a classroom setting. And although we have some answers, we don't have all the answers, especially, as I mentioned, as a clinician. I don't have all the answers to work through areas of concern with my students and their families. However, I do have the resources at hand. I do know the folks to call on, the right people to call on, like Mark as a clinician, as a psychologist, traditional practitioners and healers among our people, to look for the resources to guide our youth, to guide our families, to help them in whatever it is they're going through or moving through and working towards healthier outcomes. So I want to remind us all that as educators, we may not have all the answers, and I know I don't have all the skills as a clinician because that's not my role, that's not my profession, but I do know where to find the help for our young people. So today we're going to focus on, when we hear the LGBTQS topic, a lot of us think about sex, gender, sexuality, and these are all a part of the discussion. The three key areas that we hear most prevalent are sex. When we look at the definition, very simply, it's focusing on biological traits that mainstream society associates with male versus female. And you hear that kind of commentary, you see it on signage when you enter a department store, there's the ladies department, there's the men's department, there's the boys department, there's the girls department, etc. You see it when you're at a hotel. You know, there's the ladies restroom, there's the men's restroom. All these kinds of things are affiliated with sex, biology. However, when we look at the gender perspective, it goes beyond that. It goes beyond the biological and speaks specifically to the cultural meanings that are attached to being masculine or feminine, which influence personal identities. And that's where the 2S, the two spirit, comes into play here. And that's what we're going to focus on most for our discussion today. The last part that sometimes is affiliated with this, again, we hear a lot about this in mainstream society, is sexual attraction and the practices and identity which he or she, which may or may not align with sex nor gender. So as I mentioned, we're going to focus on gender specifically. When we look up definitions for gender, a lot of the definitions state that it's considered, or in my opinion, was considered one of two sexes, either male or female. It's like you had to fit in one of those categories. And as an educator, you think about, I used to teach in an all-female school. Literally, we have them across the United States. We have schools only for males. But as an educator now, we need to fast forward ourselves to this 21st century and become more sensitive to not focusing on one or the other, but to become more fluid in our thinking. It may or may not depend upon biological traits. And that's key for us as educators to not box our students, box our youth into one category or the other. Lastly, gender is a concept that describes how societies determine and manage sex categories. Now that's society, the larger mainstream group, not our communities from which we live, not the communities from which we grow up, but mainstream. We need to really focus on the cultural meanings attached to men and women's roles. And Mark's going to speak to that later on, but specifically how individuals understand their own identities, which include but not limited to being a man, a woman, a transgender, or intersex, or any of the other terms that we hear out there. But to really know that a lot of our two spirits don't focus on one or the other, but actually focus on both.
So an important question is, what does it mean? And not only for Indigenous educators or families, but also for non-Native educators, those that are working with our children across Indian country. So what does 2S mean in LGBTQ2S? So researching, these are some of the definitions that we found, was someone who is of American Indian or Alaska Native descent who possesses both a male and female spirit. It is used with many American Indians and Alaska Native communities to describe gender identity and sexuality regarding traditional tribal roles. And this one clip that we have here that we found gave a very wonderful description and explanation of not only historical areas of influence, but even the traumas that we continue to face today, not only as Indigenous people, but just think of those relatives that are two-spirit, because they're a minority within a minority in this category. But this is a really short explanation that I hope you all enjoy.
Oh, it looks like we don't have the audio.
Guys, we can't hear it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. It's coming out pretty loud over here, but it's not, it doesn't sound like it's coming out on your end.
Correct.
Okay, let's try it again. I'm gonna try it one more time. If not, we can just give an explanation of what. Okay. Let's see. Could y'all hear that? Or no?
No. On the share options, there might be an audio share.
Share, excuse me. Share. Multiple participants can share simultaneously. I'm wondering if I can share this. Okay. No, it doesn't look like that.
Oh, Paula, thank you. She said, when you share, you need to click the box share audio sound.
Okay. Share audio. This one? Oh.
Quit the PowerPoint and start again. And then someone said, if you click on screen share before the display, there's a box for share audio sound in the bottom left.
Yes, okay.
So do that before you before you display it.
Okay.
One more time. Though the label has only been used since the 90s, the concept of the Two-Spirit is something indigenous groups have identified with for centuries. But what does Two-Spirit actually mean, and where does it come from? So what is Two-Spirit? It's an umbrella term that bridges indigenous and Western understandings of gender and sexuality. You may recognize it as the two that sometimes appears on the end of LGBTQ2. There are many definitions and understandings of Two-Spirit, and each is nation-specific. The term was intentionally introduced by Native people with the goal of finding common ground and helping educate about traditional teachings in a contemporary context. The Two-Spirit Society of Denver offers the following definition. Two-Spirit refers to another gender role believed to be common among most, if not all, First Peoples of Turtle Island, North America, one that had a proper and accepted place within Native societies. This acceptance was rooted in the spiritual teachings that say all life is sacred. So how did the term Two-Spirit first come about? In 1990, in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, at the 3rd annual Native American Gay and Lesbian Gathering, the term Two-Spirit was proposed and affirmed by consensus. The word was a potential solution to what Native scholars and activists called the problem of naming, or making the many different sexual and gender identities that fall under the Two-Spirit umbrella legible across Native and non-Native cultures alike. For example, to illustrate the diversity of meanings that Two-Spirit contains, consider the following. In Lakota, the word winkte means to be as a woman and refers to two-souled Lakota people who transgress boundaries of gender from what may be considered male to female. In Dene, nadlehe means those who transform and refers to one of 4 separate genders: masculine-feminine, masculine-masculine, feminine-masculine, and feminine-feminine. Each gender has its own word in the Dene language. And those are just 2 nation-specific examples. There are so many more. Each nation's understanding of gender and sexual diversity is different and grounded in specific spiritual beliefs. Although all nations don't have a concept of Two-Spirit people, across those indigenous nations that do, Two-Spirit people were historically held in high regard and often considered sacred or divine, holding important positions like matchmakers, medicine people, or warriors on the front lines of battle. Many Two-Spirit people perform roles traditionally assigned to both men and women. Witwa, a famous Two-Spirit of the Zuni or Ihamana, was known to take part in masculine tribal matters and feminine tribal matters, and was even sent as an official Zuni delegate to Washington, D.C. Part of the reason Two-Spirit was adopted at the 1990 conference was because much of the written record on the indigenous nations of North America begins with European contact. For instance, the writings of Jesuit priests from the 1600s contain references to berdaches, which means kept boy in French, to refer to those who embodied both male and female genders. These writings often focus negatively on perceived cross-dressing among the Anishinaabe. The term is not only inaccurate in that it projects a European understanding of gender, but is widely considered pejorative by natives. Two-spirit was an attempt at self-determination across linguistic barriers, because the existing language, foreign and imposed violently on the indigenous peoples of North America, was both offensive and deeply colonial in its gaze. European colonizers imposed homophobia, rigid binary gender roles, and misogyny under the guise of civilizing indigenous people through the Christian tradition in residential schools and beyond. As a result, indigenous people were robbed not only of their land, but of their spiritual traditions and way of life regarding two-spirit people. Many nations came to forbid and punish two-spirit unions and self-expression. As recently as 2004, Kathy Reynolds and Dawn McKinley, two Cherokee women in Tulsa, Oklahoma, attempted to marry under tribal law, setting off a convoluted legal battle with serious political and social implications. The two were thrust into the spotlight against their wishes and became instant public symbols of the battle for two-spirit rights under tribal law. The Cherokee tribe is the second largest in the US. Although they were granted the right to marry, the decision to issue them a marriage license was soon challenged and led to a tribal law declaring that a union was to be between a man and a woman. Eventually, in 2016, the law was overturned. By that time, a wider cultural shift had taken place, both outside of and within the Cherokee Nation. In recent years, many Native people are returning to their two-spirit traditions as a way to heal from the injustices the American colonial project has visited upon their ancestors and traditions. In 2011, the first known U.S. two-spirit powwow was organized by the Bay Area American Indian Two-Spirits. Since then, powwows honoring two-spirits have been held in Montana and Kansas. And in March of 2017, the largest powwow in the US, the Gathering of Nations, honored two-spirit people during its grand entry. Two-spirit identity is resilient and precious. It has survived centuries of colonial violence and prejudice. These sacred ways of knowing live on amongst Native youth seeking to know more about themselves, elders who have kept the traditions alive in spite of the odds, and anyone in between. It should go without saying, but two-spirit is not a poetic way for non-native LGBTQ people to express themselves. We're looking at you, Jason Mraz. It is, however, a sacred tradition among the first peoples of this land we call Turtle Island that all of its inhabitants should know about and respect.
So I would think about what you just saw encapsulated just within the 6 minutes, so much information to go back and to listen or view or preview, if you have not, for others. There's just so much powerful directives and encouraging words, historical information for not only us as adults, even for individuals that are truly trying to understand the two-spirited relatives, where they fit in, the difficulties that they face. One of the things that we wanted to share, this individual that was sharing this YouTube piece was about 1.5 years ago, maybe 2 years ago. And he brought up this musician. He's a well-known musician, Jason Mraz. And he wrote this poem, and I'm not sure if he composed a song. It's called The Two-Spirit. And non-Indigenous people, for that matter, were looking at this as an interesting piece because it went viral. And he was married to his wife, and she, and both of them came to grips during a time of his life where he wanted to be with the man and didn't know exactly what was happening. And she coined, or she's the one that said, what you have is you have two spirits. And so he started writing and composing either a poem or a song where it went viral, where his understanding, non-native, he's a non-native understanding of what two-spirited is. So that's not what it is. It's taken out of context from individuals in a social sense, a non-traditional sense of indigenous individuals. So I wanted to find more out why he made the comment, the narrator for the piece. The Native history that we see in front of us, and this is just according to research on Native Two-Spirit personhood, the Two-Spirit considered to be sacred beings, as he shared in the video there, embodying both male and female personalities of or all their ancestors and or nature. The Two-Spirit indicates an ability to see the world from both male and female perspectives. So as they were seen as medicine people, as holy people, an example would be if there was a sacred circle of women coming together on issues, let's just say just any issues that they may have, domestic violence. And here comes Mark in the circle saying, well, let me tell you what I believe you're saying and what you should do. What's more impactful, more powerful is when the groups such as these female groups are run by female, because women have that understanding of what women go through. And here's a male coming in to say, this is what you're doing. And this is how they saw the Two-Spirit, how sacred and holy they were, because they could come in and sit in those sacred circles and share their guidance of having both spirit, male and or female. Two-Spirit expresses the concept of balance within a person.
Something else that the video
Hey,
pointed out.
Sorry, guys, real quick. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure. So you're not saying that natives should not refer them to themselves as Two-Spirit people, because they are Two-Spirit people, correct?
Well, and see, and we're going to be sharing this further on in the slides, is that not all Native individuals perceive themselves as Two-Spirit. Not all tribes, almost 600 tribes, have accepted this way. It's only like 150 plus that have embraced, and it's in their stories, it's in their paintings, it's in the writings of this is the identity. But there's so many more young individuals and adults that have chosen this lifestyle or have been born into this way of life, where the tribes, the discriminations in the tribes, which we'll be sharing,
Are not accepting that.
Right.
Got you. Thank you for that clarification.
So as the video pointed out, berdache is a French term. Actually, its etymology derives from the Middle Eastern, but in English, we would refer to it as berdache. And prior to that word even coming about, our own people had their own words, still today have their own words of how to refer to a Two-Spirit among their own community, among their own tribe. And again, it wasn't until colonization happened that we were given a term or labeled a term through the Europeans to describe Native men and women who assumed the dress, the social status, and the role of the opposite sex. And the photo that you see here before you is similar to what you saw in the video. And this is Wiwa, who is the most well-known Two-Spirit, Native Two-Spirit, who happened to be Zuni. And she was around during the 1800s, mid-1800s. And as the video also pointed out, that was so famous and so well-known in the country at the time that she was invited by an anthropologist to go up to DC for several months to go speak to people about her way of life, to speak to people about who she was and her people. And then even had an opportunity to meet then President Grover Cleveland to discuss. And it is known through some of the research that we've read and studied, is that the president at that time didn't even know that she was actually born male. Are there any other questions or comments that I know we've gone over a lot of information in just the first few slides regarding gender and identity, as well as the term two-spirit, and trying to define these things. And we're not able to see all the chat comments or questions at this time, but Julia, are there any comments or questions that you see, or does anybody have their hand up and want to ask anything specific to us at this time?
I'm trying to control what's in the comments, guys, so I'll try to jump in as I can. So far, there's nothing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we just had the one question from Deanne about non-natives should not refer to themselves as two-spirit. Just general thoughts or reflections on that from you two?
And that person's correct, because remember this terminology, and it was shared in the video, and I'm going to share it later on in a timeline. This was born, this term two-spirit was born out of our own people coming together and discussing, processing, thinking, praying about how do we identify it in English so that other people can understand. I hope that answers your comment or helps a little bit.
Yeah, thank you.
Two-spirit people found amongst the indigenous cultures make up two additional genders. As we heard earlier, the feminine man, womanly man, the masculine woman or the manly woman, traditionally considered to be sacred beings, embodied both the feminine and the masculine traits of all their ancestors and nature. Because they embodied both, they were able to be assertive when needed. They were able to be compassionate when need be. And a lot of personality traits, not stereotyping, men may not have a control or connection to their femininity or the feminine side to be understanding, to be passionate. And I'm just throwing that out there as an example when we have compassion and caring and embracing and holding and saying, I love you, mainly coming from women, that a lot of the two-spirited individuals, whether they be male or female, would possess those traits of both male and female personalities. They are chosen by their community to represent this tradition. And once this happens, they live out their lives in the opposite gender and can also get married to someone of the opposite gender, to their adopted gender. And just continuing on, just with some of the history that I wanted to share, that we believe it's important. Throughout Native history, two-spirits have been acknowledged and honored for who they are, and we can't stress this enough. And I know we've heard this several times already. They're medicine people, they're holy people, that they are to be honored because of the personalities and or understandings that they possess to have an understanding to deal with crises and to be assertive when need be. For hundreds of years, Native tribes have had transgender, transsexual, and third gender roles prior to Western contact, as the YouTube video showed earlier. When we were invaded, if you will, we had a one-way frame of thinking, and if it wasn't this way, it was outside the box, then it was considered wrong or bad or evil or not of God. A Christian frame of thinking of people that needed to change to be normal. So over 150 tribes recognize two spirits. There are traditional and cultural terms for them in their language and roles for two-spirit people. And there's something that in our research that we found that is very, very interesting. And I'm going to see if I can manipulate this as we watch together and close this out.
And there's no audio to this. It's just an interactive map.
Hey guys, someone
Yeah.
said the audio was low. Is there any way that you could pull up your volume just a bit, please?
Okay, it's all the way up. Let me see. It's all the way up. Maybe we'll just speak louder. Is that okay, or does it still sound the same?
I could hear you fine. So it could be just on their end. So, and some other people are saying that they could hear fine. So,
Okay.
yeah.
It's all the way up.
I can hear
Okay.
you a little bit more.
Okay. Thank you, Mary.
Mhm.
If we look at this, if we can all see this map of the US, and if you just hover with your mouse, as I am on the left side, you'll just see me kind of waving it around.
Oh, sorry. You might have to reshare your screen on the new application. So if it opened on your browser, you might have to reshare on there.
Oh, I see. Okay, let's try this again. My apologies.
Yep, no worries.
Is that better, Julia? Okay.
Perfect. Oh, it just went away. But we were there.
Okay, now there.
Perfect.
Okay, great. So as we look at this map, we see a lot of these names in this area, and it's maybe a little hard or difficult to pronounce these because it's in the language of the tribes where, yes, the Native American tribes' historical terms for two-spirit people, unique to each culture. So like if I were just to come up in this area right here, it would have on the left side the tribe underneath where I'm looking at, like the Paiute, and it would have that name there on describing the two-spirit in their language. The Cherokee and down in Texas. So it gave us a very interesting point to look at not only where these tribes are located that accept over 150 tribes of the two-spirit, but stories and even the names that they had within that tribe.
And this was developed, if you can see up at the top of the screen,
Yeah.
by the Center for American Progress. And it's included in, the hyperlink is included in the PowerPoint. So those of you who want to look at it later and go over each, or go over as many as you need to, you're welcome to do so. Yes.
Okay.
In summation, as a quick glance, if we go back to when this term two-spirit came about, I alluded to that earlier, back in 1988, there was the first Intertribal Native American First Nations Gay and Lesbian American Conference in Minnesota. Only 2 years later did they congregate again at actually their third event, and this term two-spirited emerges for the first time, where they're discussing it at this intertribal gathering, trying to understand or describe or discuss and really discern, how do we want to self-identify? We have this term berdache that is only available in the English language, that was assigned to us, that was labeled to us. We want to self-identify for our own people. And so it was commonly discussed and decided upon that the word two-spirit would then be the most appropriate for our people who fall into this LGBTQ2S category. Going on through the course of history, you can see how they had the first two-spirit sweat lodge in the 2000s, as well as adopting laws to recognize same-sex marriage, and even some really great mainstream media culture came out of this, so that people were becoming better informed. Back in 2009, and I'm going to allude to that in one of our resources later on, there was an award-winning film documentary based on the life of a young man. And as we go on through the course of time, we know that many tribes, over 150, have terminology, have words to describe their two-spirit people. Moreover, though, tribal recognition is now taking place so that our people are being honored and respected for who they are, not what they're being labeled. Are there any comments or questions at this point in the chat? Hands raised.
There's no comments in the chat.
Okay, no worries. So as we move forward, we're going to shift gears just a little bit because we're gearing this towards our youth. We have such concern for the work that Mark and I have done with our young people, K through 12, and even in, like I said, in the higher ed realm. Our Native youth have a lot to say, and we can learn from them and their experiences today. They, in turn, can learn from their tribal community. It's really important that they have a stronghold, they have a connection to who they are and what their traditions are, and recognize beyond the English two-spirit, what does my community say about who I am? In addition to that, they can learn from tribal elders. I've watched, I don't know how many videos, read how many documents about the tribal elders today who have participated, put together, and supported our young people in honoring who they are, not saying that they have to conform to mainstream society, but really recognizing that you have something different, you have something more, you have something that you need to be comfortable with and recognize and say on your own, and not to worry about what everybody else is saying. And these tribal elders are speaking from their own experiences, so that as our youth go through societal rejection or family discourse, that they can actually recognize and remember that they have self-worth, that they have value to their life. They don't have to conform to what media is saying around them.
And I want to add also what we've seen from just working with youth across Indian country, the ones that we have noticed blossom, become successful, are those individuals that are supported by the family, and more so the community, almost empowering them to continue to be the best individual they can be as our Creator has created. Even amongst our own people, there's a lot of rejection, family discourse, where we've seen the flip side of these beautiful children be ridiculed by their own family, and take their lives, unfortunately and sadly, and or attempt suicide. And it's incredibly difficult for our young kids, as they say, the acceptance of just accepting who I am. I'm not here to have my family disown me. I feel like this is how our Creator has created me. And these are children, and ninth grade, 8th grade, being so confused of, do I do what my parents tell me? Do I do what I'm reading? Even our own traditional stories say that it's accepted. How come it's not accepted here? What am I to do? And these are the experiences from some of the experiences on a flip side of those that are being successful and continuing on with their life, when we have some that are being rejected from their own family members. Have been a very, very difficult journey.
The Northeast Two-Spirit Society did a survey several years ago, and one of the cultural informants from that community, from that survey at their gathering, stated, "We have our own community, but we're not a community. We are a community within a community that nobody talks about, nobody knows about, and nobody cares about. I was brought up with a mom and dad and older brothers and people that supported me. Not everybody has that, though." And that's the case for so many of our young people, where they may be supported by their family, their grandparents, their parents, their siblings. But then we have a flip side of that, as Mark mentioned, where we have several youth who have nobody to turn to. And that's key for us as educators, as clinicians, to come in and step in and to be a support system. again, as educators, we don't have all the answers. We may not be able to know the process to help them work through what they're going through in a therapy session or a therapeutic sense, but we can point them to the correct resources and help them in their journey.
Hey guys, I have a question.
Sure.
And forgive me for my voice. One thing I am noticing, or what I have seen in my little world, is that it seems like women are being more accepted in Native communities more than men when they're coming forward. And I would like to know if you have any insight of that or any information to share with that, any statistics, anything would be great.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic question, because we're seeing a lot more bullying happen to the men, to the young boys. A lot of kids that are wanting to hurt themselves there's more male than there are female. As far as the reason for acceptance, just as a psychologist, is again the surroundings. When someone is wanting to be connected to their feelings, if you will, it's usually more female than man. To understand, more female versus men. And it's not to say that's just how we're built. We go out and we hunt and we do what we need to do, come back. We don't need to hear any issues. I'm just putting the bacon on the table, cook it, let me go to bed and get back to the routine tomorrow. But women, in the circles of women, seem to be more forgiving for the most part. Not every woman, but for the most part, and understanding. So again, having the two-spirit individual, the personality of an individual to say, I can be at a point where I need to be assertive, I can. If I need to be aggressive in some areas, I can, but I can also be sensitive. Sometimes it's really difficult for men to switch like that quick. But it's not to say that's the reason why, but in circles, what I've seen is more accepting in the women of those that are coming out versus the boys. We still have kids that are still trying to make fun, or that are still making fun, young boys of not, and it's not understanding and are being educated of what is happening. What is the history? What is the culture? What are the stories telling us?
I think something else that's real important to point out is that in our research, it's a lot of what we're doing is ongoing, and there's such limited literature out there. There's such, several of the books that we've used or Mark used in his research as a clinician, for lack of a better word, can be considered dated. It's like in trying to find current, high quality current information out there is a challenge, because there are not a lot of publications right now. There aren't a lot of resources documented right now that we can pull from where you get those statistics. And I think that's something that's needed, that's lacking, because we know we have this population among our people that we want to thrive, we want to be successful, we want to be healthy and whole, and to not feel like they have the stigma attached to them because of who they are. And so that's something we hope to continue to do in our research for future. Let's see, the next area that we're gonna show has a video. So we need to make sure that we share sound. And this is a quick snippet into the life of a young person and her experience as a two-spirit.
I'm gay, lesbian. I was suicidal. I've had thoughts. I attempted once, and now it's no longer an option or a thought. I want to say maybe around 7th grade is when I started to notice that I acted a little differently towards certain girls. I wasn't sure why. I thought it was just like I really wanted to be their best friend or something. I knew what I wanted to be, but I felt like it was too much of a problem, thinking that maybe I should just leave. Maybe things would be better if I wasn't here. I talked to an elder of mine. His name is Rodney Bird, and he's also Two-Spirit. He really helped me be more comfortable with myself. He was just telling me a lot about like how our people saw gay people or lesbians or transgender, and he said that as a Two-Spirit, we hold a lot of power because we can walk a balanced life between feminism and masculinity. Not a lot of people can do that, and not a lot of people can understand how to walk in those two kind of worlds, but us. And he said that our people accepted transgenders and gays and bisexuals and all that. And now when I have suicidal thoughts, I just replace the negative with a good energy, which is singing for me.
What's real important is to consider, Mark and I have been sharing with you about the honor and the way of acceptance they've had among their communities, their tribal communities. But as you can hear in this young lady's story, there's also some negatives. There's some unfortunate incidences that have occurred. And as a clinician, Mark's going to address a few of those.
Just sharing just what are the needs of our relatives, our nieces, our nephews, our families, right? There's so much need out there, but speaking specifically about the LGBTQ2S, what they're feeling is real. And that's another thing that I've heard with young individuals is, I'm just told that I'm going through a phase. I don't know, but that's all they've told me. And so I guess I have to deal with it. And what I see among family is they're not given any of the tools either. I don't know how to deal with my son that says he's gay. I don't know how to deal with my daughter standing evil if she says she's lesbian. So I just tell her to stop it or knock it off, and in hopes that it would just stop. Well, I work with the children as well, and it's more than just an experience or a phase for these individuals, these beautiful beings. Creating a safe learning environment is critical for our children, knowing that that's the last thing they need to think of when they're trying to understand something about reading, writing, and math, that they go to school in fear of being ridiculed and or beat up and or threatened, that our educators in our school districts make sure that safety across the board, not just for male on male or female and female, but not addressing LGBTQ issues because they are real. And I've worked with different tribes where they dismiss it like, it's, I'm talking about these gang members that are here or these other individuals that are trying to bring drugs on the campus, and don't see the LGBTQ2S as a serious concern, almost like this whole thing is a phase. It's not as important. But when we look at some of the data that I'm going to be sharing with you, you will see how many children are suffering out there, and it's alarming. Improving healthy outcomes for youth. So again, it's how we can be not only educating in our classrooms as educators, if we're able to identify areas where we may see or identify kids not being able to learn as other individuals, because you as the teacher may see that there may be something going on. And I'm not saying for everyone out here to become therapists, that we stay in our respective professions, but when in doubt, check it out and refer. So there to identify the educators or administrators, to identify those individuals that you may suspect may be having some issues, so we can provide professional support and help so they can improve their self-esteem, the healing, being grounded for our youth. One of the areas that we shared our last gathering together was on bullying, but specifically in this area, in this category, 85% of the students reported being verbally harassed, 40% reported being physically harassed, and 19% reported being physically assaulted at school in the past year because of their sexual orientation. And what I was alluding to earlier was 2/3 of students reported that they don't feel safe at school. I mean, think about that just for a little bit, that they're coming to school not feeling safe. And how are we supposed to help them balance that we want you to feel safe, and then we expect them to do great on their scores in reading, writing, and or math, but because of their sexual orientation. So it is something that we see when we speak with these children, that they are working twice as hard because they are trying to fit in. They are trying to look at what they can do to survive in the classroom without being ridiculed. And I just wanted to go over this just briefly. It's a little small, I apologize, but it's homeless LGBTQ youth. The youth experience many hardships, but perhaps one of the biggest is homelessness. I'm not sure if we even took that into consideration. 42% of homelessness agencies do not even address LGBTQ issues. Despite the elevated rates of homelessness, you would think because of that number that they would have an area to address and how they can tackle this area of concern. The average age that lesbian, gay youth in New York become homeless, 14. The average age that a transgender youth in New York becomes homeless, 13. And we look to the left and bottom, which is alarming for me, is 68% of homelessness, LGBTQ youth have experienced family rejection, 70%. And out of that, we look at 54% having experienced family abuse. I've worked with many families and children that were experiencing just that. Some of the kids wanting to commit suicide because their family didn't accept them. Their mom or their dad didn't accept them, so they wanted to end their life. And that was extremely difficult, and it continues to be extremely difficult to have these conversations with kids, because you would think that would be an easy answer to go to the family and say, you need to stop what you're doing because your son or daughter wants to end their life. And what's more difficult and frustrating is to hear the family say that Jesus created them to be a male or a female, and they're stuck with this is my position. And of course my jaw is hitting the ground and thinking, I just shared with you that your son or daughter wants to take their life, and you're saying, well, I know that this is how it has to be. If not, then they can't be here, and I've detached. So we have some families that have taken that course of totally detaching from their child because they're not living a Christian or a way of life in that particular household. So off to the left, the estimated cost just to incarcerate a youth is $53,665, whereas you see it's $5,800. An estimate cost to permanently move a homeless youth off the streets and prevent them from becoming incarcerated. I'm all about healing and therapy and a way where we can work and pray together or just heal versus incarceration. And our children need more of the healing. They need more of the prayers. They need more of the acceptance and motivation as beautiful individuals. And lastly, 15% of homelessness shelters reported that helping homeless LGBTQ youth is not essential to their mission. So we're looking at some areas where there's a gap, where they're not even addressing this, but then we look at how many kids are homeless because of being who they say they are. And it's alarming for me as a clinician to look at that. But I feel confident and motivated in having this statistics and or data to share and educate other professionals so that they may share this with the tribal council, the school board, and others in the communities to help those that may be suffering in silence. And because of time, I'm just going to just briefly share about the LGBTQ2S, that youth are especially vulnerable to mental health concerns. It's important that we understand that they are vulnerable to mental health issues and face increased risk of physical and sexual exploitation, substance use, and suicide. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for young people between 10 and 24. LGBTQTS or 2S youth are 14 times more at risk of suicide than other youth. There was, when my wife and I lived on the Navajo Nation for about 9 years, when I was in the process of writing for the American Psychological Association an article on Two-Spirit, there I heard of a murder that had happened. I believe it was in Colorado, Cortez, Colorado, of a two-spirited young youth, Navajo, and it really impacted me and or motivated me to finish what I was writing and to share as much as I could with others on the holiness of these beings, of these people. And as Allison had stated, that we all are sacred, we believe that, we know that, we understand that, and we feel it's an obligation of ours to share that with professionals such as yourselves, educators, and more importantly, with the youth that we work with.
As teachers in the classroom who spend a lot of time with our young people, and sometimes out of the classroom, whether we might be a coach, we might be attending a game or some other extracurricular activity to support our students, sometimes we're unsure how to address this. We might be able to identify something that's going on with the young person. We may be able to see that they have a concern, they're not sure how to share it, and we're not sure how to address it. We're not sure if we have the right words to say. And it's okay to say just that. And I have a simple one line that we could say to them. I don't understand, but I want to be respectful of you. I want to respect you. I want to respect what you're going through. And I want to help you.
Like, help me understand. And kids that we speak with appear to be more receptive when we are not judgmental or say, quote unquote, you're going through a phase and or as the YouTube video earlier today, putting labels on individuals, that we're coming with open hands to say, we want to be here to understand, help us understand, but we want to respect you and the journey and who you are.
I think something that's helped me a lot in a classroom and even with my own children, raising them and my grandchildren now today as a parent as well as an educator, is that if a student or a child will ask me a question and I don't know the answer, I feel very comfortable saying, I'm not sure what the correct answer or what the best answer is for this, but let me look into it for you. And you got to hold true to that. You look into it, you try to find the best answer possible or two answers possible or resources possible in this case, and go back to the student, to the child, and share with them what you found out. Don't just say it just to brush them off. You share that information. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure about how to answer that. You put your own words together and say that, and then go and tell them you want to look into it, and then get back to them. Don't leave them hanging, because from day 1 to day 3, you don't know what's going to happen with that young person and what they're going to be experiencing, what they're going to be feeling and thinking if you don't return to them. So where do we begin as educators? How do we even start helping them understand that we want to support them, encourage them, be there for them? In today's 21st century, I feel it's very important to respect the names and the pronouns that people use to self-identify. How do they want to be addressed? He, him, she, her, things of that nature. It's really important to use what they are most comfortable with, not what you see in front of you, and not how you see their name on paper in front of you, or what was written on their registration paperwork, but how do they self-identify is key. In addition to that, we need to acknowledge that the family love, the support, acceptance helps to protect all people from suicide. So find a connection. If you see that there's a child that's struggling with this, if you can identify something the child is experiencing or going through, find and make a connection with who's at home with them, who is raising them, who's bringing them to school, who's that connection. Because once you let them know that they are that important to you, that you want to find out who's at home, then they see that you love and support them also, and does prevent the area of suicide, the attempts as well as the successes of that. It's really important to let that young person know that, whether directly or indirectly, that you're open to listening to them. Again, we don't have all the answers. We don't know it all as educators, believe it or not. We're not the clinicians, we're not the practitioners, but we can help them find the correct resources. What is so a key idea that we feel very strongly about, Mark and I, and he shared about this earlier, is that we want our youth to be connected to their tribal culture, their history, their language. It's when they're centered on this, when they're focused on this, when they have a connection to where they come from, then they become more centered on their gender and their identity. If they don't have that connection, they're being educated off the reservation, they've lived off the reservation their whole life, then they sometimes don't know, they don't have that tradition being kept up in their home. Some, and I'm not saying all, some, and this only applies to some students and their families. There are a lot of families who still go home for ceremony, still hold practices and traditions in their home, and that's wonderful and that's great. But it's unfortunate that some of our children are losing that connection. Sometimes our children want to share information on their terms, and we need to respect that. We need to respect their desired level of privacy. I find that probing with open-ended questions gives them that opportunity to share as much or as little of what they want to share. And sometimes you don't even have to ask the questions. Let them share what they want when they want. If they find that they can trust you, they're inclined to share more with you and ask for your help, ask for guidance. As educators in and out of a classroom, it's key that we adopt zero tolerance policies for bullying and harassment. Mark read the statistics to you earlier about how these children are verbally abused and physically abused. And as educators, we are there to make sure that these children are getting the best quality, high quality education possible for reading, for science, for whatever the topic is that we're called to teach. More importantly, to make sure that we have that in our classrooms, we need to make sure that our students, our children know that we're not going to allow them to be bullied or harassed. I'm not sure what everybody teaches or what our roles are, but one of the things that we need to be more mindful of, again, here in this 21st century, is as educators, in the sciences especially, we need to support sex education that is more LGBTQ2S inclusive, because of what our children, what our youth are feeling and experiencing. We need to recognize that, because the bottom line is that all life is sacred. we are called to address our students with respect and to help guide them, to help them in their journey, because they are all allowed, they're all deserving of their inalienable rights. This means they need to have a safe place to live, a clean home, a safe home. They have to have the right to education, just like everybody else, high quality education, the best possible, and that's providing them with a safe learning environment and healthy opportunities for taking care of themselves, knowing about their bodies, knowing about what's going on with them as they're growing from being a 9-year-old, 10-year-old to a 15, 17-year-old, understanding what they're feeling physically inside and what's going on with them physically, how it's changing who they are. And again, it goes to the bottom line that it's a human right. All life is sacred. We want to be sensitive to questions and comments at this time.
Does anybody have a question for us before we continue on any of the information that we shared with you all?
I just have something. Oh, go ahead.
Yes, Mary, go ahead.
Okay, I have something to share. I'm from Blackfeet country in Montana. And this is the very first time we're going to have a rad run, June 15th. And we've been going out all over, you know, because it's really sensitive. And we're going to have speakers there, and it involves the whole community. So we're just all excited about that because it's the first time it's going to happen in our community.
That's wonderful. I think I just hearing what you're saying, that you're having this is incredible. And also sharing that this is the first time is a milestone. This is historical for the individuals there that are adults, Two-Spirit, that didn't have this opportunity when they were youth and probably wish there would have been a glad run when they were growing up. So I just want to compliment all of those behind the scenes that have put this together. And I wish I could be there to give you a high five. I think that's great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Anybody else have a comment or a question they'd like to share before we move on?
I'll just say real quickly, there's been a very active chat. So you may want to look at that when you can see it.
Okay.
Thank you, Paula.
People are very passionate about this, and you've opened up a lot of communication today, so thank you.
Oh, okay. We just paused the our slide presentation, and yes, there are a lot of questions or comments rather.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're comments.
I can kind of.
Can you guys hear me? And I apologize for the way
Mm-hmm.
I'm sounding. I'm a little sick today, so forgive me. But I just posted a link to one of our websites. We have done some work in this area. So if you're wanting resources, if you think that your schools or communities need more training in this area, please reach out to us. You could do it via TA request or just by sending us email. But yes, if you look at the chats, people are very emotional, I would say, as I also got emotional just listening to you guys, because I feel like it's yet another way to put down our peoples. So we need to come together to stop this stereotyping.
Mhm. Yeah, and reading some of the commentary very quickly, somebody, I think it was maybe even you, Teresa, that there needs to be more work in this area. As I shared with y'all earlier, the literature is so limited. It's unfortunate that we know we have our Two-Spirit brothers and sisters, children among us. We know that many of them have sad stories and many of them have hopeful stories. And it's key that we draw from that experience, that education, that their life, their journey, to learn from and to be able to share with our youth, to have them know that there is hope in their life, that they don't have to look at becoming one of these statistics of homelessness or suicide or any of the horrible consequences of just being themselves, literally just being who they were created to be. So thank you all for sharing. Julia, I'm not sure if we have a way to see all this chat later. If we can talk afterwards, thank you.
And there's
Yes, definitely.
there's just two that I wanted to address, and I'm not sure if we were able to earlier, but it was from Julia. Is it Julia? Was it you? Or just remind me of the statistic about students' mental health improving. And that there's no solid data. It was just based on our own observation in working with tribes across Indian country on what we saw with individuals that were supported with the families and or the community be successful throughout their academics and even graduating versus those that were ridiculed among the community, in addition to the family home of not being accepted. And someone else had shared, I believe it was Paula, on it's a lot more difficult with some of the tribes coming from a male dominant way of the culture in the acceptance for those that do not have those stories, where it's not accepted, if you will, among the people. So what do the children do? What do the individuals do? Do they just deny it? Well, when that happens, then we see a lot of our youth attempting suicide when they're not accepted. So it goes back to the adults as people. I don't want to just say Indian people, but what is the right thing to do when a child is threatening his or her life? What do we do as Indigenous people? Our teachings of all those that are sacred, you would think it would be a no-brainer. Well, okay, I know it's not in our way, and that's just not how we run things in our family. But we sit down and we look at how we can be supportive with our son and our daughter, or do they leave and they become homeless? Do they leave and become individuals or statistic with domestic issues or substance abuse issues, let alone a suicide factor? So it's definitely something that we need to revisit as Indigenous people, as people ourselves, working with traditional people and what the right thing to do has been very helpful for me when I work with tribes that are not accepting of these stories of Two-Spirit, and I need so much support and assistance from traditional practitioners on what to do when it comes down to this young boy, this young girl wants to end their life, and the family is still steadfast on, we're not going to change. You better change. We're not going to change. And the child has either been in the hospital because they've attempted unsuccessful attempt, and yet some of the family members are not fazed by that. Does it need to happen? Do they need to kill themselves for families to wake up? And I've been at those homes and funerals for those individuals where families were just saying it was too late, only if I should have changed. We don't want to be at that point where I think I should have listened when the cry for help was there. So the level of frustration that you're hearing in my voice is the passion and motivation that we have to advocate for those that may not be able to advocate for themselves. And this slide of all life is sacred is just that. Is just that.
I think some people have raised their hand, guys. You might want to give them the opportunity to speak at this time.
Absolutely, absolutely. We can't see it because we put the slide back up, but thank you so much, Teresa, for letting us know.
Yeah, we only have a few more minutes. Do we want to go ahead and remove the slide and let's take some questions and comments?
Sure. We were at the end, and so it's perfect timing. These were just, and they're all in here in this presentation. Some of the data that was collected for the research on the article that was published back in 2010 that I wrote. And the book on the left is the most recent that we could find, Urban Indigenous Youth Reframing Two-Spirit. It was published March 2021, and it is the most recent research or information that has been written since 2000, since 1988, since 2000. So a lot of these books are dated. So we were very happy to see one come out, and it was in tribes up in Canada.
And I'll go quickly through these next couple of slides. They're all resources for you to review later on when we're done here. But the We Are Native website is a collaboration with the Portland IHS community up in the Portland area. And they do a lot of great work across the country for young people in this content of Two Spirits. They have a list of books here on their website that you may want to peruse and also use. There are a few articles, one written by Mark, and then this was a really great resource I found online because it talks about tribal equity. It's about 110 pages, give or take, but it focuses on examples of like legal language that tribes can use for the resolutions for their community. It includes Two Spirits as part of the community. And this is now in its 3rd edition. It talks about family life. It talks about employment. It talks about hate crimes. It's a really great tool. It's downloadable for free. And then there's several films. Some are documentaries. Mark mentioned earlier the little boy up in Colorado that was murdered, that his film is called Two Spirits. It's a documentary based on his life. So there's 3 documentaries. The first 2 are very short to watch, and the other 3 are feature films. So that's just some opportunities for you to look into more if you are interested and want to support our Two-Spirit youth.
Okay, so I think the first one came from Ms. Begay. And anybody else that would like to ask questions, now's the time to do so, guys.
Hi, Dr. Bays. It's nice to see you. This is Ms. Begay with Wind Rock School District.
Yes.
Hello. So I'm really, I appreciate all the information that was presented here. I really do, because this is something that I have been working. I did bring up the concern with my director, because I work with the exceptional student services population. And I have observed a few students within the past school years who have come forward at school, maybe because they feel safer as opposed to being at home. And so in the school district that I work in, I've had some teachers who don't know how to approach their students who may identify with their gender identity, and so it's a big concern for me, because I want to be that person that supports them, and I have been doing my best, but I feel like I'm alone in this approach, because a lot of teachers don't know how to. And then the other thing I've noticed is that they're not comfortable. I think that's the biggest concern, is they're not comfortable with it themselves. So I think that if we're going to work together in the school district that I work in, you know, we have to come back. We have to ask ourselves, you know, what is wrong? Why am I not comfortable with this? So that we can, you know, because when we're at work, providing services to our students, and you know, we have to maintain our own biases and opinions and, you know, stigmas, but in terms of how teachers, educators work with some of these students, I think a lot of them are pretty, well, at least what I observed is they're uncomfortable, you know, to a certain extent. So I am interested in trying to, I don't know, figure out a way, or maybe attend more trainings so that I can do something in the school district that I work in. And I can, you know, because I did talk to a couple of other counselors in the district that I work in, but I unfortunately was surprised to find out that a few of them are not comfortable, you know. So I have to kind of step back and think about how I want to do this. How can I be of help? Because I don't have a problem with it, but I do feel compassion for the students that I do service who have come out to me, and I hear their challenges and struggles at home, you know, and I don't know what to do except be to listen to them and to let them know that they are beautiful inside and outside, you know. And I have addressed them in my because I work as a mental health therapist, so I have done did as much as I could to make them comfortable in when I do work with them, especially when they do have you know, a different name that they call themselves, you know. It could be Bill as opposed to Christina, you know. So I let them know that it's okay, you know, if you want to be called Christina, that's fine, you know, I'll respect that. That's totally good. So, but I do my best, but I feel like I'm kind of alone in this approach. And I do want to kind of, I was thinking about trying to form a support group for individuals who identify themselves as LGBTQ. But I need to be I need to be creative about that in the school district that I work in. So, but this is great information. Thank you. And I'll take some of this information and kind of apply it in the areas that might help me do what I want to do to support the students I work with. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. You know, Genevieve, I just want to say, I'm not sure on the teacher front, because we used to live in that area, you know, and you have a lot of Belaganas who come in to teach in the district, and maybe not, they may be comfortable dealing with Belagana youth, but maybe not Native youth in the context of this subject area. And so just down the road from you have a key expert, Dr. Wesley Thomas, who we use some of his materials, and we have his book as a resource. He's just down the road from you in Crown Point. So I don't know if you want to take time to reach out to him, but he may be willing. I'm not sure where how close he is in residing to your school district, but he works just down the road. So he may be willing to help you, give you some pointers on how to start something with youth there at the district.
Another thing that I would, a couple of things. First and foremost, I think it's really important that this individual or individuals are coming to you. And that speaks volumes, because you are creating that safe space for that one individual. Ideally, what we want is to create a safe group, then a safe school, then a safe community, but they're scared. And you mentioned that several times. So what you're doing, I would continue to do what you're doing, continue to empower them, share what you can on this PowerPoint on letting them know who they are. They're sacred people, they're holy people, they're gifted people, but they may have never heard that. They may have heard the total opposite. But with your colleagues, to share some of the statistical data that we have there to show that this is a problem, that this is an issue, it's a crisis, and that needs to be addressed. And you said you're in mental health, that this would be an area that you can advocate and champion for those that don't have a voice, that you can look into that and share what you feel that is important to you on the slide that you can use for those kids. So they need to be heard, they need to feel comfortable, but you're creating a safe space and a safe place for them, and that's very, very important.
And thank you
I
both.
had one more thing to say, guys. I know we've run out of time, but I wanted to say that both Allison and Mark is working with us now as a consultant, and I'm very happy to have them aboard. They're actually consultants and advisors with us. And we do have an LGBTQ curricula, and we have done some training. So if your school or community is interested in this, please, I think Julia, you shared the TA request form. And if you just fill out that TA request form, it'll come directly to us as far as what your needs are in your school and community. And these could be done Zoom, and if need be, we also travel. But I'm definitely going to talk to Mark and Allison about this specifically and doing some more work with this on this subject.
Thank
Does
you.
anybody? Yep, go ahead.
I was going to say thank you to the participants. Just trying to read through a lot of these chats real quickly. Many of you quoted about the safe havens that you've created, the safe environments you've created at the schools. And that's where a lot of these youth are feeling most comfortable. So thank you to educators, to those of you serving in the school, providing those safe spaces.
And there's just briefly, Elder Rita would say and I'm just reading this that she had on, if it's too hard, not to try to overthink it and stress too much of it, but to continue to work with them and what needs to be done so that they don't feel uncomfortable, that it's really awkward. But when in doubt, refer, especially if this is something that you're uncomfortable with, so they can speak with others that feel comfortable and that can help them along this way.
Guys, we've run out
Well,
of time.
thank you both so much.
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, this has been enlightening for myself. So I do appreciate the information. I've always treated everybody as equals, especially when it comes to my Native peoples. But you have opened my eyes to a whole different area that does need more research and definitely more attention, more training. It's just another way that we need to help our own people. So I thank you both for this very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. Go ahead, Julia.
Yeah, have a great Thursday, everybody. We will be sending out a follow-up email with these resources, and hopefully it's a continued conversation for all of us. But happy Pride Month to everyone who's celebrating, and thank you so much to Dr. Allison and Dr. Mark Bays. This is a wonderful presentation.
You're welcome.
Thank you all. Blessings.
Blessings your way, everyone. Thank you.